I welcome members, invited guests and the public, both here and those watching on webcast, to today's meeting of the Economy Committee. Our main topic of discussion is London's culture and the nighttime economy, and we encourage anyone to take part in the discussion on social media using a couple of hashtags. We have Assembly Economy and Night Economy. And first, we've got a few short items of formal business that we're going to go through before we get to our witnesses. Apologies for absence we have received from Fiona Twycross, and thank you, Assembly Member Copley, who is substituting for her. Declarations of interest. Can I ask members to note the list of appointments set out at item 2? And also ask if members have any other interests to declare. Nothing? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes from our last meeting, which was held on the 20th of June 2017? Thank you. And can I also ask members to note the completed and outstanding list of actions? Excellent, thank you. And can I ask members to note the standing delegation outlined on item 5 of the agenda? Thank you. And that brings us to today's main item, a discussion on London's culture and the nighttime economy. And so our first guest is Philip Kolvin, QC, who is chair of the Nighttime Commission. So welcome to you. And our first question for you is to ask you to outline the strengths and weaknesses of the current nighttime economy offer in London.
I'm very pleased to do that, but can I just, by way of introduction, say that I'm absolutely thrilled that you're carrying out this investigation. It's coming at an extremely good time. I can see you had a wonderful conversation on the 20th of June with people from Croydon and Walthamstow and Heart of London. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the outcome of this investigation, because I'm sure that it's going to help everybody in this building as they get on with their work to promote this important sector. So far as the strengths and weaknesses of the London's nighttime economy are concerned, I think we need to remember that we're starting from a very good place. I mean, London is globally recognised for its nighttime economy. We have an enormous number of licensed premises. We have world-leading theatres. We've got fantastic galleries and museums. We have excellent nightclubs and so on. And so the strengths of the economy, I think, is the sheer quantum of the nighttime offer. The weaknesses, I think, of the economy, there's a number which I think we have to address. The first is that I would say that London is to some extent characterised by hotspots and dead spots. So the middle of London has been identified largely as a stress area. It's thought there's too much alcohol and entertainment. So a number of the policies, particularly of Westminster City Council, but also to an extent Camden and Islington, are to try to restrain further development in that part of the sector because it's said that the public resources can't cope. And it's not just in Westminster, Camden and Islington. As you know, Hackney has got hotspots where Shoreditch and Dalston have been designated as stress areas. But there are other parts of London's nighttime economy which are at a very much earlier point on the trajectory. There's some parts of London where there's not really much of a nighttime economy at all. And I'd like to see the possibility of our being able to even out provision, so as to provide greater jobs for local workers, so as to reduce some of the stresses within the hotspot, so as to improve sustainability, and so as to bring the economic opportunities of the nighttime economy to all parts of London. The other aspect of this is that while I feel very passionate and enthusiastic about our nighttime offer, there's parts of the nighttime offer which are suffering. So, for example, it's already been identified by my colleagues in this building that LGBT venues are reducing, that the nightclub offer is reducing, that pubs are significantly down. And so there's elements of the economy where I think we need to look very closely at what the reason for this is. Take, for example, pubs. One reason why pubs may be reducing if I can just play devil's advocate for a moment, is that the market demand for pubs might be reducing, in which case we might applaud that because money is being displaced into other elements of the economy. But another reason might be that pubs are being priced out by business rates or being pushed out by gentrification of the area and by what is now a distorted land value market in London, where the biggest prices obviously are going for housing. We've got to get to the bottom of that, because if these are assets of value to the community, then we've got to work out what we can do to intervene to address those imbalances.
Thank you. That's a very good kind of just outline of what the current sort of situation is. Do you, within your thinking about the nighttime economy, are you also thinking about people in ordinary, everyday jobs like nursing and...
Oh, absolutely. Everybody has their own perspective on the nighttime economy. You know, I like going to grassroots music venues. I like going to high opera. I like finding that little bit of the experiential economy, that little theatrical performance and a vault in a previously unused part of London. And that's all marvellous. I suspect that for the great majority of London, Londoners, just being able to go out at night and enjoy themselves is a huge economic expense. And so I don't want a London nighttime economy which works like the Ritz, open to everybody if you can afford to get into it. So we have to create a nighttime economy which realises the aspirations of every Londoner. Take your nurse. That nurse might be working in an A&E department. He or she might have a couple of hours off in the middle of the night. I ask myself, and I put this to developers actually a few hundred yards from this building, does that nurse have the opportunity to go in to a warm cafe with a little bit of Wi-Fi and a toilet and a safe place to sit and call his or her friends or meet his or her friends and have an affordable bowl of porridge or a bit of toast before going back to work? Does that nurse at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, when they come off duty and they want to do a little bit of food shopping, have they got the opportunity to pick up something on their way back home? To me, this is as important a question about the nighttime economy as is culture and entertainment. The way people use London at night, we've got to provide for all users at night and not just party users.
Thank you. My second question to you is, can you set out the direction of travel for London's culture and the nighttime economy articulated in the vision document, which has been published today, and how it addresses those challenges?
Yes. I think we mustn't forget that the work of the Nighttime Commission takes place in the context of an enormous amount of good work which is already happening inside this building. It's not something separate, it's part of a concerted effort on the part of the Mayor to put culture and the nighttime economy front and centre of one of his key policies. So good work is already emanating from this building. We have a culture supplementary planning guidance, which is in consultation. We have a London plan, which is going to be out for consultation in the autumn, which is going to talk about the nighttime economy. The nighttime economy, you will detect, is in the transport strategy. There's going to be a cultural leadership board. Amy Lamé is doing fantastic work on women's safety, on LGBT venues, on community pubs. I met just last week with the public health officials from the Greater London Authority, so we can talk about how we can create a healthier nighttime economy for all. So there's an enormous amount of good work already happening, and to some degree the work that I'm doing is going to reflect and mirror the work which is happening already within this building. But specifically, can I talk about how the Nighttime Commission specifically? The Nighttime Commission is going to stand a little bit aside from the day-to-day operational issues which are being explored by my colleagues at the GLA. Because our job is not just to consider the here and now, our job is to consider policies and programmes for the London of the future. And so this means that we've got to get our thinking caps on, we've got to consult the London public, we've got to consider best practice from around the world, We've got to ensure that all the expertise which is already within this city is assembled and collated so that we can be sure that London is not just the best nighttime economy now, but is going to remain the best and is going to be the best in 10 or 20 years' time, whatever transatlantic alliances we're in, whatever European alliances we're in, the nighttime economy has got to be a beacon of attraction for the world. So that's my job, to try and make sure that that happens. And can I just add, because I'm sure you're going to come on to it anyway, it's no good being the grooviest nighttime economy in the world if people are losing sleep. So it's a nighttime economy which has to work for every Londoner, whether they've got money or no money, whether they are old or young, whether they like alcohol or don't like alcohol, whether they're disabled or not. Whatever their proclivity is, whatever their background is, whatever their means are, we've got to make London's nighttime economy an attractive place for them. And if their major leisure activity at night is sleep, then they are the person who is forefront in my mind, because you cannot do it at the expense of other people. We've got to find policies which mediate out the protection agenda and the growth agenda. They go hand in hand, they're flip sides of the same thing.
Thank you. There's going to be a lot more questions on all of this
I'm sure.
from my colleagues. I'm going to hand over to Assembly Member Bailey.
Morning,
Hello.
Philip. How are you? Just want to start with a question. How did your strategy and your actions thus far assure outer London boroughs that they're very much part of the vision for this cultural expansion to be part of the night economy? Is Queen's Theatre in Havering on your list of places to make accessible to everybody?
Yes. And I've read from the last evidence session some discussion about whether people are prepared to travel to venues which are offering attractive events. And my experience is they are. And if you look at the figures, even for outlying clubs, say in Croydon, and then you survey, I can't necessarily disclose all the sources of this material, because some of it comes from my legal practice, but if you then survey where people come from who go to those venues, yes, they'll travel. Of course they'll travel if there's something really attractive to be seen. People don't not go to the cup final because it's in Brent. I mean, people come from hundreds of miles. There's no reason why if we brand up and market up the 1,500 square miles of this great city, we can't ensure that people will go. And it may be, I haven't been to Havering a great deal, but if I had a friend in Havering who said, do you realise what's on here tonight? Sure, I'd go to Havering for it. And in an era of the night tube and the overground going 24 hours, why on earth wouldn't people travel if we can make London attractive for all?
Thank you for that. But that's almost what I'm asking is what is the Commission going to do about that? Because as a Londoner, I have doubts about the Commission. So I have questions like, how many times has the Commission met?
There was a commission which was in existence under the previous mayor. Since I've been in post in January, we've been engaged in the exercise of appointing a new commission. The invitation letters have gone out to the new commission, but it hasn't yet met. However, what we have done, which was a much easier exercise, was to start a body called the Borough Nighttime Economy Champions Network. And that was an invitation to the leaders of all the boroughs in London to appoint to the network a senior officer and a senior councillor. Now that body has now met twice, it's meeting quarterly, and the whole purpose of the body is to ensure that all boroughs share the fruits of London's economic success when it comes to the nighttime economy. And if I might, Mr. Bailey, just give you an example of what we did at the last meeting. We had a fantastic deputation from Walthamstow, which talked about, and in fact I don't need to tell you because you heard all about it at the last meeting, but we talked about how Walthamstow was now promoting a leisure and cultural economy based on its own heritage assets. And so I'm in a sense more focused on the boroughs which are an early part of that trajectory, the Croydons, the Barkings, etc., than the boroughs which have already got an existing economy and now they're fine-tuning and finessing. So I can assure you that it is a key part of the work of the Commission to ensure that every borough has the opportunity to grow. But taking the example of Walthamstow, being able to say this is what is done, if you get good people in a room from culture, economy, regeneration, heritage and so forth, to create a vision for what is going to be done, and then create licensing and planning policies around the vision, these opportunities are open for every borough if they choose to take them.
So you're telling me, finally, Chair, that what I want to hear is that the Commission are doing specific things to support outer London boroughs, to give to them direction, best policy, best practice, orders to do things differently. Because what's slightly alarming to me is the Commission is going to cost Londoners money and it needs to bear fruit. And the parts of London that the nighttime economy is the least active in is very far out of London. So to my mind, as someone who lives in Romford Way, Walthamstow's pretty central actually. What about the rest of us on the ring? And if the Commission can't do that, for me personally, it will have failed. So did all the boroughs send a representative? Have you sent those representatives away with something to do?
Yeah. Well, we've had the great majority of London boroughs have attended the Nighttime Economy Champions Network, and we're still working on that. I mean, we can't require people to attend, but we can invite and we can promote and so forth. There's a whole principle in this vision which talks about how this nighttime economy has got to work for every single borough, that we've got to ensure that the nighttime economy is properly dispersed among the boroughs. For me personally, it is an absolute touchstone that wherever you live in London, you can access a great nighttime economy. We can all play around with the Opera House. I mean, it's there, it's fantastic, if what you like is opera. But if you are in Romford, if you are in Epping, wherever it may be, of course, we've got to give best practice for policies and programmes which work for you. Now, I cannot direct any borough to do anything. The Mayor's got exhaustive powers in the London Plan. They're not exactly powers of direction. But in licensing terms, it's the boroughs that hold the key. So what we have to try and do is to inspire the boroughs to want to take action. And the best way of doing this is by example of the boroughs who are already doing it. On the last occasion, you heard from Croydon, who are already also doing it. We've heard the Economy Network from Kingston, who are already doing it. So the good practice is there, but it's got to be spread out.
Okay. Chair, thank you.
I think that's, I'm going to bring in Assemblymember Arnold at this
Yes,
point.
thank you. And good morning, Philip. Can I just firstly say, I'm sorry to hear you haven't been to Havering, given it's got some of the largest Ibiza-based nightclubs in the city. Yeah. And I would have thought if you wanted an example of nightlife, it matches that of some of the examples you've put in your booklet, which actually doesn't capture images from outer London. I just put that to you. You might want to visit Havering.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to answer that. I mean, I certainly beat my own breast that I haven't been to Havering. I think I've been to the great majority of London boroughs, but I also only work one day a week. But I would be delighted to come to Havering and to see what is happening in Havering.
Happy to have you.
You can go partying with my man here.
I would absolutely love to come because it's all part of my education.
And I'm glad you say sort of wordy about Waltham Forest. It's a borough I represent, and I would agree with you. It is absolutely time for that borough to have a sense that it's a place of growth. Whether that growth is round the nighttime economy or the nighttime economy is part of that growth.
Yes.
I think you have to read Tony Travers's Commission's work to see how that fits in.
Yes. I mean, but Tony Travers has got some really insightful points to make about this.
Have you seen that document?
No, but I've heard Tony Travers speak a number of times and spoke with them at a debate recently.
Okay. Well, I'll just refer you to that document, that Commission's work, and then that might add and put what you're saying about Waltham Forest in perspective.
Yes.
And before I go into my question, you mentioned nursing, and I would just like to say, as a former nurse and knowing nurses, if you can find a nurse who can find 2 hours on a shift, then you're a better man than most. So, again, I think some of your examples just give me more concern than should be the case. Anyway, let me just ask you, now that you've published your vision, what are the next steps? What are the key milestones, and how do you intend to track progress?
Yes. The Nighttime Commission invitations have gone out. We hope to have the first meeting of the Nighttime Commission in the early autumn. And my commitment to the Mayor is that 12 months after the first meeting, we will produce a report on policies and programmes for London's nighttime economy. I very strongly believe that a vision, that a strategy, or even a plan can't be top down. You can't disappear to the top of a mountain and come down with a wonderful way of handling a city as complex and diverse as London. It's got to come out of the experience of Londoners, including, if I may say so, your nurses. What do they need? And if it's not getting a bowl of porridge after the end of their shift, maybe it's getting to work safely. Maybe it's getting home safely. These are important issues for the nighttime economy. Maybe it's being protected by the Mayor's Healthy Workplace Charter. So there's lots of stuff which we can do, whether or not they've got time off to do it. Everyone participates economically. So we need to go out to London and find out what their experience is of the nighttime economy, what works for them, and more importantly, what doesn't work for them. Very often in nighttime economy, you can find that, that operators have taken a quick route to get in a particular demographic, whereas sometimes older people, sometimes families, sometimes minorities or faith groups don't see the nighttime economy as being something which is there for them. So it's absolutely uppermost in my mind that before we present anything to the Mayor, that we have consulted Londoners. And I'm really happy to talk to you about how we propose to do that.
Well, carry on and tell me, how do you consult?
Okay.
How are you going to consult with residents?
One of the main routes for consulting residents indirectly is through politicians, because people like you actually represent residents and know of their experiences and concerns. And I would say exactly the same about the London boroughs. So, for example, I've had an excellent conversation with Darren Rodwell, who's the leader of Barking and Dagenham, and he's explained to me how he will be able to reach his residents through Barking's consultation mechanisms. So that's marvellous, that's one element. But there's many more elements. You have a wonderful facility within this building called Talk London, which reaches 40,000 Londoners. And so I'm hoping to utilise that facility to speak to Londoners. If resources permit, but only if resources permit, I'd love the opportunity to try to reach a representative sample of Londoners so that we can be confident that the views which we get back are representative of Londoners as a whole, rather than merely reflecting those people who've chosen to respond to survey questionnaires. There's also a huge number of expert bodies within this city. I mean, I've written down in my little black book 120 who I want to write letters to ask them what their experience is, from trade associations to residents associations to BIDs to town centre managers to local authorities, and so on and so on and so on, all of whom will have perspectives to bring to bear. But then there's people who just don't like responding to consultation, and I want to reach those people. So the GLA has, I understand, an excellent youth outreach facility. I want to speak to teenagers. What's their experience of the nighttime economy? What do you do if you're 15 or 16 and you live in Ealing? What do you do to entertain yourself at night, other than sort of sit around on a street corner? What are we, the people who run London, what are we providing for you? I want to get directly into the experience of independent operators. Sometimes the big chains can handle the bumps and the bumps of operating in a regulated sector. The small independent operators sometimes live in a state of fear about what might happen to them if they put a foot wrong. So I would like to talk to them. And then I'd like to talk to particular sectors, whether that be racial, sexual or age, and so forth, to ensure that what we have, by the time we sit down and write our policies, is a genuine cross-sector or cross-section of views of the London population as a whole.
Philip, thank you for you've given that clearly some thoughts,
Yeah.
and we'll look to see the documentation about the range of consultation
Yes.
when you produce.
Can I just add one little point to
Yeah.
it, which is that I've been hugely impressed within this building. We've had fantastic talks within this building with both politicians and special appointees and officers. There's an immense amount of talent here, and this commission can't sit independently of all of that on some mount. And so I'm going to establish something which I'm calling, working title, Mirroring and Tracking Group, so that as the commission is talking about something, we can come out and say, look, these are the things we're thinking about, do you have views? Because every time I have a conversation with anyone here, I come out with a fantastic idea. And a lot of what we're going to do, I have to say, is not necessarily just inventing wonderful new things, but just reflecting the good things which are already happening for the benefit of all Londoners.
And lastly, Chair, as you talked earlier on about the other work that's going on, the Mayor recently produced, or the Deputy Mayor for Business recently produced on the Mayor's behalf, the Mayor's Good Work Standard. That's all about fair pay for Londoners. So in your consultation and your work, do you see some sort of interface with the work that's going on with other deputies, such as the Deputy for Business, and particularly the whole thing about employment in the nighttime?
I mean, I've plotted out in my mind that we come to write this report. We've got to start with a baseline. And part of the baseline is going to be just getting data out, how many premises, what sort, what hours, crime and disorder, health, all those sorts of things. But part of the baseline has got to be what the GLA has already got out there. I mean, these policies are. Are they good policies? Maybe we'll be saying they're fantastic policies. We don't need to improve on them. We just need to disseminate them. But in the middle of this exercise are workers. There's 725,000 of them. And I think that's the same as the population of Leeds, just to put that into some perspective. It is vast, and they are the engine of it. Now, I can see huge benefits from focusing on workers. Benefit one is the one which I'm sure is uppermost in your mind, is that these people working at night need to be protected. And, of course, and that's a given. But there's other benefits. If we can get the workers really wonderfully skilled, if we can create some common training standards for workers in the nighttime economy, can we get to a state where having worked in London's nighttime economy is an international badge of honour? It's something which people aspire to. In the same way as having worked in a Swiss hotel or a French restaurant, you may then be able to go anywhere in the world and say, I trained at such and such in London, and that will be a badge of honour. There's other benefits. There's wonderful benefits to the customer in that. Why shouldn't we have the best service economy in the world? Why shouldn't people make their tourist choices because the service they get in London premises is the best?
Okay.
But lastly, there's one more very important point here. Very often, we pigeonhole nighttime workers into particular jobs. Well, you're the busboy. You're the door supervisor. If we could train the said busboy, when they're collecting their bottles and glasses, to notice, now there's a woman in the corner of the premises looking a little bit stressed, being chatted up by a bloke she didn't come in with. Or a door supervisor. I know I'm there to break up the fights, but there's 3 people walking down the street directly underneath someone's flat making a noise. Can I not intervene and just say, hey guys, people sleeping here, can we broaden out people's jobs so that they're more woven into the job of public protection of the nighttime economy rather than just the functions of selling the beer or collecting the glasses? So that's a very key part for me, that standards for venues are linked to the qualities of workers, are linked to the police attitude to licensed premises, raising standards across the piece, and then maybe linked to the premises' ability to get insurance and the terms upon which it can get insurance, and then linked to its resistance to regulatory action from the authorities, because all of its workers are skilled up to the London standard. So all of these themes interplay, we can create a more effective nighttime economy with workers at the heart.
Thank you.
Thank you. And very interesting idea of these super skilled London London workers. Assemblymember Hall is coming next, but I think Assemblymember Dismore wanted to jump in briefly.
You said that invites have been sent out to join your new commission. Have any of those gone to residents' groups?
No, not specifically. It's quite difficult to find a particular resident group which is representative of London as a whole. But they have gone to public protection workers, and they have gone to...
I mean, I'm asking about residents.
Yes.
And the reason I ask about residents is, well, you may not get residents for London as a whole. There are certainly residents groups who've got considerable experience of the nighttime economy.
Yeah.
For example, the Covent Garden Community Association, which
Yes.
represents both Westminster and Camden in the Covent
Yes.
Garden area.
Yes.
There are other organisations in Camden as well, which I
Yes.
represent. Now, one of the issues that arises is the experience of residents now. And if you don't get that direct experience, how are you going to cater for residents' needs? I mean, it's already well inviting the boroughs, and I can see why outer boroughs want to get engaged and all that sort of thing. But to a degree, there can be a conflict of interest there between boroughs who want to get their slice of the nighttime economy benefits,
Yeah.
who might also, in doing that, not fully represent the interests of their residents. It depends on how the ward and so forth works out. So I'm concerned to make sure that we do see residents properly represented in this. And I saw on the previous membership of the old commission there is no resident representation either.
Yeah.
And I really do think that to get a slice of reality, I mean, Jeanette's giving you a slice of reality about the life of a nurse. I want to make sure you get a slice of reality about residents.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is actually by talking to residents directly, not
Yeah.
indirectly. And
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually met and had a long meeting with the person on the Covent Garden and
I'll use that as an example.
Sorry, okay. Well, I want to give you an example back. This is not a sort of remote exercise where residents are kept at arm's length. The Commission will have 28 people on it, hopefully, who are residents of London. I'm a resident of London. I feel very strongly that residents should get sleep. So that's one aspect to this. The second aspect is that absolutely for sure we will be talking to some of the main resident associations with London, whether that's Covent Garden, and the West End, whether that is Camden, whether that's Islington, whether that happens to be Spire in Shoreditch, or whether it happens to be those in the outer boroughs. There's no question at all that we will have to be talking to those people. But remember, please, also, that we're going to go out and talk to thousands of Londoners, all of whom will be residents, and for sure, resident associations will be specifically consulted as part of this exercise.
Well, I do think it's important that residents are properly represented, not just consulted. I mean, if we look at your, not yours, the Mayor's document that came out
Yes.
this morning, if I look at section 4, the action plan, there, which is supposed to be about promoting the safety and well-being of residents, workers and visitors,
Yeah.
the word resident doesn't appear once. Now, that, to my mind, is a bit of an alarm bell. And my main concern, representing residents who actually do live in these quite high-pressured, some would say high-stress, some would say over-provided areas,
Yeah.
is that their interests tend to get overlooked in the face of the economic
The drive for
imperatives.
growth and all
Yeah,
that.
now, so I'll put it to you, I really do think it's important that you do try and find resident representation from those areas who do have experience of the problems and also the benefits. It's not just a one-way street, because they do have ideas about what can be done to improve
Yeah.
the good part of nighttime economy, properly represented rather than just consulted.
Okay, well, look, so Dismore, I will take that as a takeaway from this meeting, and I'll take away your views and discuss it with colleagues. But can I just give you please don't have alarm bells. I'm not a politician. I don't have a political agenda. I'm here as someone who's a great enthusiast for what happens when you bring great people in a room and find solutions to problems. And we cannot have solutions which are not solutions for residents. If you've ever read Macbeth, there's that great speech where he says, Macbeth doth murder sleep. I will not be the person who goes down in history as the person who murders sleep. Those interests are upmost in my mind. I think Sadiq Khan says in the foreword to this document, they are uppermost in his mind. And represented or not represented, and I will promise you I'll take that as a takeaway from the meeting, this is not going to be a programme which somehow ignores the views of millions of residents, because 98% of Londoners, 95% of Londoners are not out there partying at night, they're sleeping. And I acknowledge that, and what we are going to do is going to ensure that their interests are properly represented.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Assemblymember Hall now.
Sorry, I just had one on. It's just on this section.
Okay, very quickly.
I just wanted to know, just very quickly, it's just what other cities you've been looking at or liaising with when you were drawing up this document, and how that liaising takes place.
Yeah. There's going to have to be some more, but so far, I mean, I read the research which is out there, and you get, for example, there's very good research has come out this year into Sydney, for example, which has tried lockout laws, and so I'm aware of what's going on in other cities. I went in February to Austin, Texas, to talk to the Responsible Hospitality Institute of America, and that had representatives from dozens of cities across the United States, but also there were Mirik Milan, who you're talking to later, and also Jocelyn Kane, who is my equivalent in San Francisco. From those places, you just pick up a huge amount of information about the challenges which are confronting those cities. I've been out to Dublin in the last 3 months, which the whole conference was about safety in the nighttime economy, with representation from across Europe, including with some really good European agencies with whom I've now got contact. I went out to Lithuania at the invitation of the government of Lithuania to talk about drug control in the nighttime economy, and there met representatives from Amsterdam and Lisbon. So I'm trying personally to sort of put out my tendrils and just absorb experiences from other cities. And there's good practice out there, but the solutions we come up to have got to be come up with have got to be solutions for London. So we listen to best practice, and then we have to translate that into London. But now I will be having a commission. There'll be a lot more opportunity to do that. I mean, for example, as you know, there's terrific agencies who work just a few yards from here, London First, London Partners and so forth, who've got tremendous experience of what goes on in wider cities. The trade associations have businesses who work in other cities. And so we will try, within the resources we've got, I mean, I'm not trying to spend a whack of GLA money here, and I myself only work a day a week, so I'm sort of slightly run off my feet in the day that I've got. We are trying to make sure that what we do here is world-beating, and you can't do that unless you're outward looking. So I'm going to do my best on the topic.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Assemblymember Hall.
Good morning. I'm somewhat concerned because your title is Chair of the Nighttime Commission, and there is no commission. You've been in the job 7 months. I'm delighted that you've been to Austin, Texas, and to Dublin and to Lithuania, but I preferred that you actually got a commission that you could be chair of first, so that you can discuss these things with other people.
Yeah.
How long do you think it could take to have the commission that you're supposed to be chair of?
Yeah. Well, as I say, the letters of invitation have gone out, and we ought now to get a first meeting of the Commission in the early autumn. It has taken a long time to get to this point. I want to ensure that when the Commission does first meet, we hit the ground running. We have the Borough Champions Network already running. We have the structures in place. I meet monthly with Amy and the people in the culture team. But what I've discovered is that you can't just snap your fingers in a large and complex public sector organisation and assemble a large body of people. It has been a process of internal consultation, of identifying the best people for the roles and identifying a group of people who are fully representative of London's various interests and sectors.
Do you think it's acceptable then that it would have taken you 9 months to set up the commission for which you're supposed to be chairing?
Yeah. Well, I can only say to you that the process has been rather slower than I might otherwise have wished. But I can only go as quickly as the internal processes with this sort of thing have permitted. So I have kept pushing, and we're now in a position where we can proceed, I hope, apace with the Commission. And the undertaking I've made is that 12 months from first meeting, there will be a report once that Commission is in place.
You see, because I'm new to the Assembly, so forgive me if I get things wrong, but I read the remit of the chair of the Commission, that there isn't one yet. that chairs up to 6 meetings in the Nighttime Commission per year.
Yeah.
So we're going to be horribly failing on that, aren't we? The Night Czar and the chair of the Nighttime Commission will hold a monthly update meeting with the Deputy Mayor of Culture and Creative Industries to track process against the work plan. Well, that can't really work because you haven't got a commission. So I'm concerned that you're travelling all over the place to learn things. You're doing that on your own or in liaison. But you haven't got a commission. You haven't got a wide base of people that you need to take advice from, which you keep saying you want to take advice from. You need to capture that information. You need it to take it back to the Nighttime Commission for which you are chair. And I just think that you keep telling us you've done bits and pieces, but it's not linking into what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, clearly you've been able to get a list of champions and they've met. Who chairs those boards?
I do.
Okay, so how many people go to that?
I think at the last one we had 40 people. I don't know from how many boroughs, but it was from the great majority of London boroughs.
So those minutes are available to us, are they?
They will be available. They're being drawn up now. There's been an administration problem. Somebody became unwell, but the person drawing up the minutes is currently unwell. So those minutes will be available. And the minutes from the first meeting are already available.
You said there'd been 3 meetings.
No, I didn't. There have been 2 meetings.
2 meetings?
Yeah.
So we don't have minutes of either meeting?
No, we've got minutes of the first meeting, which
The
we'd be
first
really
meeting.
delighted to supply you.
Excellent. And you don't know how many boroughs are represented?
I think that from the 2 meetings, I think we had just over 20 boroughs at each of the meetings, which I'm informed is quite a good record for that kind of forum at the GLA. But I want to work on that and ensure that we try and get it up to a full complement.
Okay. My colleague asked if you'd been to Havering. Have you ever been to Harrow?
I have been to Harrow, not in my current role, but I have been to Harrow.
Okay. All right
Assembly
then.
Member Hall, we're running out of time
I
slightly.
know,
so
well, I
I'm-
haven't taken
yeah,
up
no,
much,
no.
though, Chair.
That's fair enough. Are you finished with this
I'll
question?
come in later.
Excellent. Assembly Member Copley, would you like to?
I'll be as quick as I can. Sharon.
That's marvellous. Thank you very much indeed.
So my first question is, when can we expect the findings from the strategic review of London's nighttime economy?
I think the findings of the strategic review will be part of the Commission's work and will come in the report, which will be 12 months after the first meeting of the Commission.
Oh, because I was under the impression that we were going to expect those in this year. So they're going to be. I mean, that's I think that's what's in our briefing anyway. Are you saying it's going to be sort of we're talking sort of 2018 now?
That is inevitably so. I'm just a little bit uncertain about what might have been said, because my plan has always been that 12 months after the Commission sits, we will produce a report. And I don't think it's something which can be rushed, but 12 months feels to me like a reasonable timescale.
Okay, I mean, so in that sense, there's nothing at the moment which from that review hasn't started yet. Is that correct?
Well, we don't have a commission, but what you do have is a vision, and I don't think you should underplay the significance of that, because that's a document which has gone through quite a period of gestation, has been through every department in this building, has had comments from a wide number of people. The principles in that, I haven't just been to Vilnius, by the way, which I've done on my own time, not on the GLA's time, but I've spoken to thousands of people at different conferences and seminars in London to ensure that those principles are something which are likely to get widespread support. And I think what you've got here, and it's been referred to as a booklet, I think I would call it as a sort of clarion call to all the different agencies in London to start thinking seriously about how we can have a good conversation about the nighttime economy, move away from the nighttime economy merely as a beast to be tamed, but as a beast which can offer great opportunities for London.
No, that's right. I'm just wondering, because, you know, we've got this document here now, of course, which is a very important document. So when you've done your strategic review, how will it influence what's in the Mayor's document? Will this be refreshed in light of your strategic review?
The vision for me is a sort of headline conversation starter. I'd be really disappointed if 12 months ahead we just produce an edited version of that vision. I mean, I'm contemplating a much more sort of fleshed out document with a great deal more evidence about what is working for London, what is not working for London, and what the opportunities are. Those are merely words. We've got to translate those words into action. We've got to, every time we say we want workers to be protected or residents protected, the question which comes back is, well, how are you going to do that? And that's what we've got to address ourselves to in the next 12 months, is positive, proper policies that people can decide to adopt or not.
No, I'm just trying to see how the two, that's fine, I'm just trying to establish how the two relate to each other. It seems like it's a sort of evolving process, is that?
It's got to be iterative, and as I've said, it's got to come out of the experience of Londoners.
Can you tell me how the Nighttime Commission, once it's constituted and once it's met, how will the Commission, what part will the Commission play in delivering the Mayor's vision, and how does the Commission's role relate to the role of the Night Czar?
Okay, the current division of labour is that the Nighttime Commission will be concerned with future policies and programmes for London. So it'll stand a little bit independently of the Mayor and will advise the Mayor the way a good advisor ought to, with some, as it were, sort of dispassion, holding the balance between all the different interests, but with its eyes firmly fixed on the future. The Night Czar, in the shape of Amy Lamé, is doing a fantastic job here and now as an advocate for London's nighttime economy, as a mediator between the different interests concerned, residents and businesses in particular, and as somebody who's really carrying a standard for some of those parts of the nighttime economy which look to be under threat, LGBT venues, pubs and clubs, community pubs, and so on and so forth. So whereas she is concerned with these sort of daily operational matters about how London is getting on now, I am much more concerned with advisory work about how London will get on in the future. We nevertheless meet every month and we swap ideas and exchange information about what we're both getting up to, but it dovetails very nicely.
And just for clarity, will Amy be sitting on the Nighttime Commission?
No.
It's a separate.
No,
right,
and I think it's really important that it is separate. So whereas there's actually, I don't want to disclose all the names of the Nighttime Commission, but broadly the NTC will not incorporate people who work at the GLA. We've got to get the message out there. We've got to absorb inspiration from out there. So the NTC is broadly the coming together of talents from outside this building. But within the GLA, there will be a mirroring and tracking group which is able to give advice and information backwards and forwards. I haven't quite answered.
So you say your advisory and the Night Czar is more sort of implementation.
Delivery and implementation, yes.
Right, yeah.
For the future, I mean, there are some excellent models from around the world of how these commissions can work. And so I would take the San Francisco Commission as a very good example, where they are actually the regulator. They dole out the licenses. In Amsterdam, Mirik Milan's department, they're working out where the clubs should go, and I hope he talks to you about their fantastic 24-hour venues, a model which I'd like to look at quite carefully here. The Berlin Club Commission is concerned with all aspects of the sort of the entertainment part of the economy, and Jelinek in Amsterdam is concerned with the public information and public protection aspects of the nighttime economy. We've got a number of lessons we can draw on from around the world. We then have to fit that into the structure of London and come up with advice from the Mayor as to what, if any, sustainable role there is for the nighttime economy in the future of London, how that's to be resourced and how it will add to the work which the boroughs are already excellently doing. So I don't want to take a one-size-fits-all, and I certainly don't want to predict the outcome of our review, but I've certainly got the models in mind and hope that we'll come up with good ideas as to how the Night Commission could have an afterlife beyond the report.
Thank you.
I just had something pointed out to me that the commission that predates
Yeah.
your commission
Yeah.
was meant to be publishing some findings in 2017. So that was it was research carried out by Westminster
Yeah.
University's Music Tank. Do you know what's
Yes.
happened to that?
Yes, it's in final draft on my desk, and when I've looked at it and I'm happy with it, it will come out. So it's pretty well ready. I looked at a draft in about March and had quite a a number of comments, which then had to be worked through the academic year and so forth. So we do now have a final draft, and it will certainly be published in the near future.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can tell me, that maybe we can try and get it out even in time for your report or something. But I'm sure we can talk offline about that.
Okay, thank you. So that's being published. Assembly member, Sean Bailey.
I was going to ask a question. Do you anticipate the Commission's makeup being changed, the makeup of the Commission being changed in the remit of your work as the lifespan of the Commission goes on? But that now feels slightly irrelevant because there is no Commission, and it feels to me that you're running out of time. And I also think, I personally think that 12 months is too long a period before the report comes out in view of when this conversation was started. So I'm just going to put that question to you. I want you to understand where I'm coming from on this. Do you feel that the makeup of the Commission will change?
Firstly, it will change because I brought in my ideas. We know how the Commission has worked previously. I've spoken to all sorts of people within this building and some people outside this building as to what would be an interesting and creative and forceful group of people who have, in some senses, in their own right, have to be advocates. So the makeup of the Commission will change pretty radically from the Commission there was before. Secondly, if you told me to go into a darkened room and produce the final report of the Nighttime Commission, I'll have it on your desk next week, but it will just be my views. And if you are really serious, Mr. Bailey, about getting something which represents the needs and views of Londoners, the business community, the residential community, the cultural community, the gay community, if we really want to do that, I'm just telling you from my experience, it's going to take 12 months to achieve that.
Well, actually, I would say if the Mayor was really serious about this, he would have facilitated a much speedier happenings. Again, just for the avoidance of doubt, in my mind, there is no Commission. I'll be very surprised if something fresh arrives in 12 months. We have no KPI. We have no way as Londoners of understanding if this Commission works or if this document is a collection of pretty words. Because to my mind, right now, it's a collection of pretty words. With absolutely
Bailey, can we have a question? Because we're quite short on time.
I would really like to answer that in defence of my colleagues.
And here comes a question.
Yeah.
How will we, as Londoners, understand if this has been any sort of useful exercise at all, remembering it was told to us how important this was and how we should all get behind it. And I'm not seeing a serious document in front of me. I'm seeing a collection of nice words. So tell me how we will know that this has any relevance to Londoners at all.
Okay. I think to produce a document which contains a number of high-level principles, including in the blue background, for those watching on colour TV, which have the action points, which are actually how this is going to be translated into action. Having discussed that with a huge number of people from across London, inside this building and out, and gaining support for it, means that we have a rallying point for the whole conversation which is happening. Speaking about Sadiq Khan, first of all, I find it really odd to think that it could be in doubt that he's seriously committed to this work. I mean, he's gone out and appointed a chair of the Nighttime Commission. He's appointed a Night Czar.
There is no Commission, and it's all very long-term and going to take a long time. So I would suggest there could be some doubt as to how serious this piece of work is being taken for London, actually. Because it's going to be a very long time before anything of merit arrives for Londoners to assess. So I would use the word doubt quite strongly.
Okay. Well, I think there's quite a lot of what you've got. You've got a vision. You'll find chapters on the nighttime economy in the Culture SPG and in the London Plan, in TfL's plan, in the policing plan. You'll find it in the culture plan. So the idea that this isn't being run through, but all you've got is a pamphlet, would just be a false view. But also, if you just wouldn't mind looking into my face for a moment, I don't take on daft projects. I am doing this because I strongly believe that we can create not just a world-beating economy for London, but an economy which works for Londoners, and crucially, if you don't mind me saying this, London is still a relatively peaceful city, but there are pockets of difficulty in London, and we face a terrorist threat. And to me, part of the answer for the inequalities, for the disparities in the lives of Londoners, is to create a sort of communal economy where everybody can share in the fruits of London's success and its cultural brilliance. So to me, this isn't a bit of fun. This is a life mission, and it has taken too long to appoint this commission. I'm sorry about that. It hasn't been want of trying, but we're working in a political organisation. It takes time to assemble a commission of more than 20 people. But I deliver projects, and I'm telling you that in 12 months' time, we will have a project that this building will be proud of and will want to get behind.
Thank you. But firstly, this isn't about you. I have no doubt about your skill. Nobody's asked you any questions about your qualifications for the job. This is about the mayor and how seriously he's taken. This is actually about the 8.6 million people who live in London.
For sure.
Thank you, Member Bailey. I think we've had
Well,
a strong answer to the question.
The Mayor's very aware of the resources that I need in order to deliver what I want, and I will be continuing those conversations.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall, and please be mindful we've got Assembly Member Dismore to come in as well.
Can I just ask you who wrote this? Because there's no commission. I know you've spent ages abroad looking at what other people do, but you don't seem to have discussed with residents, who all of us represent. Who wrote this?
It's a collaborative effort within the Culture Department, but it's also been around all of the deputy mayors and the different departments in London, in the GLA. I took a lead with writing the document. It's only intended to be a sort of starter for 10 with principles that we can get behind. I doubt there's anything in there, even for residents, they would disagree with, given that almost the first sentence is that uppermost in the Mayor's mind is the protection of residents.
Yes.
So it's intended to be a document which is a discussion document for London. It is the starting point of our work. It is certainly not the end point.
Well, a starter for 10 is less than I think we'd all hoped for. And at the end of the day, it is not just for you to do. It is for you to consult with others to see what they think, i.e. chair of the commission, of which there is not. My question was, how are you going to keep public and stakeholders informed of your progress? But in reality, there is no progress. You haven't even got the commission that you are supposed
Well, I think
to
the
be
one
chair
factual
of.
matter that we can agree and we might be able to move on from is that we do not currently have a commission. What I'm trying to offer you is the commitment and the routes to make sure that the work of the Commission is useful to London. And critically, at the centre of that are the views of residents. And I've tried to describe the consultation exercise.
But really, after all this time of a nighttime czar and a chair of a commission with no commission, nobody's going to find offence with this, of course, because it really, there's nothing in it. As Assembly Member Bailey said, there's no KPIs, there's nothing that we can hold anybody to. It's just, it's bland, with respect. And clearly you've not taken other people's views of it, or certainly not many people. There may just be 2 of you that have inputted into
No,
this.
that's not correct.
But that's the whole idea of the Commission, for people with varying different talents to get together, to put the vision of lots of people, not with respect just a couple of you, to us to say what you're going to be doing.
Well, I think we're probably going around the same houses.
I think we are going round in
the
houses.
commitment I've given you is that it is precisely how I view the Commission. We have no difference in our views.
Assembly Member Hall, there were 2 specific questions that I was hoping were going to be asked. If you could ask those, please.
What support will there be for nighttime economy workers as the culture and nighttime economy offer is extended?
Right. As I've said, right in the middle of this are the people who are going to have to deliver the nighttime economy. Amy currently is doing work around the position of night workers, and there's very good links between Amy and Frances Grady from the TUC, specifically in relation to women. Last night she had a very, very successful, I understand, I'm sorry I was unable to be there, a Women's Safety Summit. Within the vision, we've said a number of things about workers. They have to get to their work, they've got to be able to get from their work in safety, which is a transportation matter. We've got to create healthy workplaces for them, and it's got to be healthy in every sense, even things like whether workers in clubs have got earplugs, those sorts of things. We've got to consider the issue of predatory conduct, within the workplace, which is an issue within the nighttime economy, and we've got to consider the question of the remuneration of workers, both in terms of their formal remuneration, the question of 0 hours contracts, and the question of service charges, where I do happen to hold a strong view that if you tip somebody, it should end up in the pockets of the workers rather than someone else. So it's more than a strand of the work of the Nighttime Commission. There's an awful lot of people work in the nighttime economy here, and they have to be protected alongside residents.
Thank you. Assembly Member Disco.
Yes, I want to come back to the question of conflicting interests, and we've talked about expanding the nighttime economy and the position of residents, and you said that protection of residents is, from the effects is important. Do you think residents are protected at the moment?
I'm sorry?
Do you think residents are protected now?
In reality,
Yes, in reality.
I think that in most places they are protected. I think they need help to organise themselves. So, for example, outside this place where I work a day a week, I work in licensing, and most of my work is in London. And there's licensing hearings I go to where what the residents say just goes. I mean, it is taken as read that what the residents say is true. And you'll hear the councillors offline talk about my residents. You know, they are politicians. They will talk about my residents.
I'm not
There's
talking
other
about licensing hearings. I'm talking about what actually happens on the ground. On a Saturday night, at midnight, in Covent Garden or Camden Town, do you think residents are protected there from the effects of the nighttime economy?
The job
1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning?
The job of planning, licensing and public protection is to create a fair balance between the needs of the nighttime economy and the needs of visitors and the needs of residents. And what, for example, speaking specifically about Covent Garden, what Westminster City Council has done to a standard of excellence is to write policies in order to ensure that residents are protected as best they can be from the fallout of the nighttime economy. Is there some further way to go? For sure, there's a further way to go. Westminster are developing a charter which is designed to protect visitors and residents. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be doing with the Commission is to work out what further can be done by way of improving the performance of all venues so that the interests of residents are taken into account. Can I just take a parallel? The National Regulator of Gambling required gambling premises to write local risk assessments. It wasn't enough to say, well, customers coming in here are safe from whatever happens in gambling establishments. We've got to take account of the locality in which we operate when we're creating our plans and policies for the venue.
Yeah, sure, fine. So, you know, some would say that parts of the areas I've mentioned are reach saturation point. And one of the things that Westminster does, which I think is something you might want to look at, is provide funding for a legal advisor in the CAB
They
to
do,
help
yes.
residents.
And he does a very good job.
But that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
But let's get back to what actually happens on the ground. Because I've had interaction with the Covent Garden Community Association, representing part of the area I represent, and they complain bitterly about the lack of police presence. And when I put it
About
to
the lack of?
police presence,
Yes.
and when I put it to the Mayor last week, or the week before his Mayor's question time, he says, well, the answer is neighbourhood policing. Let me put it in context. 50,000 people visit Camden Town every Friday and Saturday night. There are 6 police officers.
Yeah,
That's the same size as a Premier League football crowd,
yeah,
at which there would normally be about 150 police officers, 200 stewards.
yeah.
And frankly, I think you could say that football crowds are generally speaking rather better behaved than some of the people we see at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in Camden Town.
I agree.
So, unless and until the Mayor gets proper resources for the police,
Yeah.
is it realistic to talk about expanding the nighttime economy?
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a number of answers. A very, very important question. First off, I didn't know the Camden figure. I've seen some Soho figures which are equally alarming in terms of the proportion, the ratio of revellers to police officers. What we have to do is to create an agenda which works for London in the context of the fiscal situation we find ourselves in. The Met Police is losing £1 billion over the course of a decade. And you know, that is a serious issue when it comes to how much resource they can devote to the nighttime economy. Within Camden, I want to say 3 things. There might only be 6 police officers, but making up the figures, there might be 600 SIA licensed security staff. So if we can get those people to be more outward facing and not just deal with the punch-ups, but to take more ownership of the street, and there are examples of that within London and elsewhere, then we can provide greater protection for Londoners just by using the venue's own resources. So that's point one. The second point is that if we can diversify London's economy, and to some extent Camden is going this way, and I've had these discussions with Camden in my legal practice, if we can move the economy away from being just alcohol-led, I'm not going to give you stats on Camden, but assume for the sake of argument it's alcohol-led. If we can model the kind of economy we want, so it's less alcohol-oriented, so it's more food-oriented, so it's more performance-oriented, so it's more culture-oriented, or retail, or services-oriented, then we can create in those streets a greater sense of natural guardianship. We can create a more heterogeneous mix of customers, which everybody will agree, including the Met Police, reduces antisocial behaviour. But there's a key. I need to answer.
I don't dispute you on that point, and
yeah.
That's going to come into my next question.
Yeah. Can I answer your last one? Because there's a very crucial point here.
Well, we're running out of time. Which is the distinction that Westminster Council has drawn between what it calls the evening economy, i.e. pre-11 o'clock at night, and the nighttime economy.
Yeah.
Westminster say 4/5 of what the Mayor would class the nighttime economy is actually the evening economy, which is basically good, i.e. theatres, restaurants, and so forth, late night openings, and post-11, which is alcohol and clubbing. And realistically, the contribution to the economy is primarily the evening rather than the night time as far as entertainment is concerned. That's Westminster Council's figures they gave us at the round table we had 2 or 3 weeks ago. The question is, why doesn't that stretch out into the night? Why doesn't the British Museum have all-night openings? Why doesn't other galleries have all-night openings? Either because there's no demand for them, or because those who might use them feel intimidated by the alcohol. You mentioned Covent Garden earlier on. Okay, interesting. Occasionally I go to the opera, and when I come out to go to Holborn Tube, I feel intimidated by the crowds at 11 o'clock at night. And until you get on control of those, through better policing or whatever, it's pie in the sky to talk about expanding these other aspects of the economy, isn't it?
Okay. Well, there's a series of questions in that question, and bearing in mind you've prevented me from giving you a fantastic answer about noise residents, but there we are. I agree with you. Westminster got this view about the evening and nighttime economy. I think it's other countries don't even use the expression nighttime economy. For me, what we're talking about critically happens when the usual office door closes at 5 p.m. I appreciate for a lot of Londoners that's not true. But it's really essential that we focus as much on creating a wonderful mix of uses in the evening economy as it is in the nighttime economy. And I think we missed a trick as a nation 10 years ago when we stopped happy hours happening in our high streets. What then tended to happen is that people left the city centre, and the people who came back into the city centre later tended to have preloaded. What we should really be trying to do is to take those office and shop workers and so forth and say, go to the British Museum, go and have your physiotherapy or your hair appointment in our high streets and keep a good mix of people in the streets in the evening. On museums, the museums have already discovered that they're able to stretch their hours into the later evening. And that's absolutely fantastic.
They're part of it from time to time.
But maybe we can do more, or maybe there's a large number of, I think there's 200 museums in London, maybe we can get to a situation where every night a museum is opening late and you've got the opportunity to. And maybe we can mix up uses. For example, in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, they have techno music nights. So you can sit and look at some extraordinary painting by Van Gogh while listening to techno. And often it's these mix of uses which broaden out the cultural experience for people from that city. So I don't think that we've suddenly got to make every nightclub in London open for 24 hours. Most Londoners would not be interested in using that economy. But when the Royal Academy, I think, had its, the V&A had its David Bowie exhibition, I think there was a night they were open for 24 hours. Or you can sleep overnight at the Natural History Museum. So there are times when you can get these facilities open for 24 hours. And this question about sweating assets because we are quite a dense urban fabric, if we could get a late performance in the odd West End theatre, if we could allow a local grassroots musician to play after the last performance in a soundproofed cinema so as to create some local entrepreneurship around the music economy, if we can exercise imagination here, then we can create a more vibrant London for the benefit of all. What I'm not about is saying to people who live in this fine city, 24 hours a day, it's chocks away, there's alcohol swilling down the streets. That's not how I view things, personally, politically or professionally, and it's not going to happen in the work of the Nighttime Commission.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. The trouble is, it already is happening in parts of London.
Right, well, do you want the answer to your question now?
Do you want to quickly get, is this the noise?
I'll give you one
question?
sentence. The one thing we never look at in terms of residential disturbance is personal responsibility. We changed people's behaviours in a number of ways in this country. One example being we got them to wear safety belts because it helped them and helped the National Health Service. I want to attack in ways where I'll be very happy to describe to you in future or now this question about whether we can influence people to leave venues and go home quietly, and by attaching consequences to behaviours when they don't, and try and change the cultural behaviour of Londoners at night. Everyone's got to raise their game. You've got to, I've got to, councils have got to, police, venues have got to. Now let's look at the visitors to the economy and bring them into that same agenda.
When you say consequences, what sort of consequences are you thinking of?
I think that what happens in London venues is if you hit somebody with a bottle, you will find yourselves in court. And I have to say, when they do, one of the people I want to talk to is the judiciary about how you can attach even greater consequences to people who do transgress in a major way in the night economy. It has got to be unacceptable that anybody in a London venue should feel under physical threat. But underneath that, there's a huge range of behaviours which just have no consequence at all. So people are able to say, oh, I went into the club last night, I got completely rattered, I woke up face down on a pavement. They probably represent 1% of visitors to the nighttime economy, but they are taking up the major share of the time of the hospitals, the police service, and they're waking up the residents. So I would like to get into the schools and educate children who are going to go into the nighttime economy about the rules of the game, not just around alcohol, but about getting home safely, looking after your mates, sexual predation, drugs, and so forth. And then I'd like to say to those same people later, now you have been in a venue, you've transgressed all of those rules, and create a system of brief interventions for those people so that actions do have consequences. And that might sound a little bit George Orwell, but I don't see why we shouldn't be able to say to Londoners, you're in a public place, you've got to behave accordingly and attach consequences if they fail to.
So you're saying kind of pick up people who are behaving badly in the street and educate them? Or
I think you'd say to them, there's two options here. You're guilty of a Section 5 offence, or you're guilty of a minor assault or something of that nature. There's two options here. You can have a caution, or you can go on a brief intervention course to deal with your aggression management, drug taking, alcohol, and so forth, so that we're working at a lower level in the same way as we do for speeding drivers. Now, all of this is stuff which I want to investigate with the assistance of the public health community as part of the work of the Nighttime Commission. It is the most ambitious part of the agenda. If we could take the behaviour of Londoners out of this equation, 1,000 other problems will vanish. And it's something which I think it's a big topic to grasp, but I'm intending to grasp it.
that sounds like a massive, massive agenda, but certainly dealing with the behaviour of it is a minority of the people that go out at night who behave so badly and make things really difficult for everyone else. But if there is a way to actually get hold of that issue and tackle it effectively, then that could be a complete game changer.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, a quarter of our young Londoners are not drinking now. They're teetotal. And if you look at the way people come out, I'm sure, Mr. Dismore, when you come out of the Opera House, you're not intimidating anybody. When people come out of performance venues and museums and galleries, their behaviour is completely different. All sorts of venues are now growing up which are not alcohol-led, which are experience-led or activity-led. So if we manage to create this more diverse economy and get a better mix of people in the economy, then we can start trying to model better behaviours and enforce them. It's a huge topic, but why shouldn't we be world-beating on this along with everything else?
Thank you. I'm going to get you to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning and for answering all the questions of
Thank you
the
for having
committee.
me, and I'm sorry we haven't got the Commission yet, but just please take my assurance that this isn't a sideline for me. It's a mission, and it's a mission which I'm supported by my colleagues here, and we're going to deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, we have a brief break now while we swap over, and we would like to welcome Amy Lamé to join us for the next part of the meeting. Do I press the gavel or do you just keep it? Yeah, sorry, I've lost my procedure note. We've lost. We are quorate, aren't we? With yes, three. We need three. So and so we can start. Yes. Brilliant. Welcome to the second part of our meeting, Amy, and I would like to start off by asking you to set out the key priorities for the London nighttime economy and your role in delivering the Mayor's vision for a 24-hour city.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. My key priorities for the nighttime economy and culture is really about balanced and sustainable growth, balancing the interests of those that work, sleep, and play in London, and enabling people to do that in a safe way, particularly women at night.
Thank you. Shall I hand over? I'll hand over to Tom.
Sure, yep. My first question, and we sort of talked about this with Philip, it's how does your work relate to the work of the Nighttime Commission? And we've had a bit of a discussion about that. I'd like to know from sort of your perspective how you see you working with the Nighttime Commission.
Yes. So I don't sit on the Nighttime Commission, and as Philip pointed out, I think that's important because the work of the Nighttime Commission operates at arm's length from the work that I do, and I sit within the Mayor's office, and it wouldn't be appropriate. So I look forward to the findings of the Nighttime Commission. I know that they've worked very hard to put together the right mix of people, and I look forward to their findings. My work is very much more focused on delivery, on the day-to-day, doing night surgeries, working with venues, acting as a mediator. So I think the findings from the Commission will influence policies going forward. But at the moment, we have quite a lot going on in the nighttime economy and culture that has not been sort of addressed in the past. So we're catching up on a lot of that, and that is my role.
And presumably the sort of feedback you get from your night surgeries is going to feed in. Is that going to feed into the work of the Commission as well? Because I assume you're getting quite valuable feedback from the people that you speak to.
Yes, and I noticed that the issue of residents has come up quite a lot in your chat with Philip. And I speak a lot with residents and business improvement districts, and I've done 4 night surgeries. My first one was on the launch of the Piccadilly Line night tube. So we started at one end and went all the way to Heathrow and stopped off at various points along the way. I've also been to Waltham Forest, to Croydon, to Hackney, and so really getting a good view of what is going on in the nighttime economy and culture across London, and residents are a really important part of that. I mean, for example, when I was in Hackney, I visited Shoreditch Fire Station. We visited the A&E department of Homerton Hospital. We visited a homeless shelter, as well as just standing at a bus stop for about half an hour and having conversations, random conversations with people that were out and about at night. And I think it's important. It's important because it does inform the work that I do. Philip and I do meet once a month, and we do share ideas and share the information that we have. I look forward to the work that the Commission is doing to inform me, and also feeding back to Philip the work that I do.
I think Assemblymember Dismore's questions on resident engagement are really important. And of course, we have to recognise as well that, one night someone's a resident, the next night they might be out and about,
Yes.
pubs, clubs, whatever,
Yes.
and then you meet them on
Yes.
on the tube doing your night surgery.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting in the work that I've been doing, sort of visiting with residents, and also the great work that some venues are doing to reach out to residents and say, why don't you come, have a drink or have a bite to eat, see what we're about. This isn't a scary thing, actually we're here for residents as well, and that is the kind of integration that we're really looking for. I know that, for example, Box Park and Shoreditch have done a great work there in reaching out to the local residents association, and they're at an interesting, their location is quite interesting, because although they're based in Tower Hamlets, they also sit on the border with Hackney. So it's the divisions that we make in terms of which ward or which councillor or something, Londoners don't always live their lives like that.
And how are you going to balance the needs of different stakeholders, such as business owners, customers and residents? And as we've discussed, the lines are blurred, of course,
Yes.
between those groups. But how do you intend to sort of go about balancing their needs, and what challenges have you encountered so far?
Yes, well, I mean, it is a tricky balance, because everyone deserves to have a good night's sleep, and everyone deserves to be able to go out and live their life at night or work at night. And so I operate an open door policy, and so people have concerns, be they residents, be they businesses. I'm absolutely all ears, and that is what I'm here for. Some of the challenges that we face are things around licensing and planning, for example. And I know that the work that the Nighttime Borough Champions and the Commission are doing to ensure that planning and licensing are better joined up. Noise pollution is a big issue. And the Mayor's consulted on the first ever planning guidance on culture and the nighttime economy, and has dedicated a whole chapter to pubs and music venues, providing guidance around agent of change principle, which I think is one law that was brought in, actually mentioned in the last government's white paper on housing. I know it's a promise of the Mayor, and I think this has agent of change principle has the potential to really transform our lives at night here in London. And safety and crime is also a big thing that we have to take into consideration with balance. And there's a number of councillors and officers responsible for community safety that will be sitting on the Nighttime Commission and are on the Nighttime Borough Champions Network. And just yesterday, I hosted a Women's Night Safety Summit, the first ever that's been held in London here at the GLA, and we had almost 100 people attending, stakeholders from across businesses, residents, people working in women's safety. So, I'm very clear about the challenges, and I think that our solutions to these challenges should be creative and taking into consideration everyone's needs.
I mean, you mentioned that sort of planning and licensing. Obviously, the planning, the Mayor has a direct responsibility. Licensing, the Mayor doesn't have a direct responsibility, but obviously, I presume the whole point of having the Nighttime Commission and things like that is to influence what's going on. In terms of planning, you talked about agent of change. Does that help to address some of the issues around residents as well? Because although it's often cited as a way of stopping complaints from closing down venues, it also works the other way, doesn't it? That if someone wants to open a venue in a residential area, you know, they have to make sure that it's not going to disturb the existing residents. Do you see that as something that will protect residents as well as protecting venues?
That's a very good point, and often we see it as the, you know, agent of change principle as being, you know, to sort of protect nightclubs, but actually it's protecting residents as well. And so for anyone who isn't familiar with agent of change, this is a case that was actually brought by Ministry of Sound, you know, very successful nightclub in the Elephant and Castle, has been there for over 20 years, is a global brand worth an enormous amount of money to London and London's economy, and attracts visitors from around the world and around the country. And so a tower block was going up just nearby, and the owners realized that, you know, this could be problematic because, of course, residents have, you know, a right to complain about noise, and local authorities have a statutory duty to respond to that. And so they thought, well, perhaps there's a better solution here. And so, in conjunction with the developers, they managed to get the building soundproofed. Also, sort of issues around design. So, simply putting the bedrooms facing the other side, away from the Ministry of Sound, making sure that windows didn't open up, you know, on the communal areas, you know, that face the venue. And as a result, that tower block has been built along agent of change principles. It is something the mayor is committed to. And this, you're exactly right, that it will, you can use it on the flip side of that as well, so that if venues want to come in, then they are the agent of change. The agent of change means the, you know, the person, the developer, whoever it is that is changing the makeup of that neighborhood, is responsible for soundproofing and ensuring that there is a balance there. And they use all sorts of, you know, audio testing to make sure that, you know, should the noise in the future go above certain decibels, that, you know, those residents still do have the right to complain. So it's not a sort of like tied up neat with the, you know, package and bow on top. You know, the residents still do have their rights in place to be able to take their concerns to the council.
And when do you know when we can expect to have the Culture SPG published?
So it's in
draft form. Sorry,
yeah, it's in draft form.
But when the final version.
I'm not entirely sure about the date, but I can definitely get back to you about that and share that with you. But agent of change principle will be in the London plan. I can let you know that.
Just my last question is about inclusivity and how are you ensuring that London's nighttime economy is inclusive for all, and that includes things like accessibility, prices, and of course people who don't drink, and you know, we know now the figure for, you know, a quarter of young people not drinking. How are you making sure it's inclusive?
It's a really interesting question, and I think that it's a responsibility of the Night Czar to ensure that our life at night develops in a really balanced way, and that includes having offerings for people who are, you know, not interested in drinking alcohol. We've seen, you know, a large number of ice cream parlors being opened in London, and I think that that's a good thing. People are able to socialize at night. As Philip said earlier, a quarter of young people are teetotal. We've seen the first low and no alcohol brewery open in London, in Leighton, earlier this year. So I think this is a growing trend, and I think that as we diversify, we have an enormous opportunity here to create a 24-hour London that is balanced, that is sustainable, and that includes making it available to people who may want to work at night, may want to play at night, or just want to sleep at night. But that diversity is absolutely intrinsic to its success.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring in Assemblymember Arnold, I know Assemblymember Dismal and also Assemblymember Hall have a question on the back of
just filling up the night surgery you talk about. Have you held night surgery specifically for residents in any of the very stressed areas like Soho or Covent Garden or Camden Town? And if so, have they been publicised to residents?
So I meet with residents as a part of the night surgeries. And the night surgeries are, so if you imagine the sort of surgery that you might have held, you know, if you were a councillor or an MP, where you invite people to come to you, as the Night Czar, I flip it the other way around. So I go out to meet people. So I've met with the JAGO Residents Association in East London, when I was in Walthamstow, in Waltham Forest, doing my night surgery there. I've met with residents. I met with residents in Stratford, in Croydon, in Brixton, in all corners of London. I also recently met with the Business Improvement District in Camden, and a large number of the people that are the businesses that are members of that are also residents in Camden. So I think that there's a big sort of Venn diagram crossover here. In some ways, perhaps it's, you know, often the people that are working and living and helping a nighttime economy to thrive are also resident in that area as well. So, you know, we have to take a holistic view of this.
So the short answer is you haven't met residents specifically in Covent Garden or Soho or Camden?
I have actually met specifically with residents in Soho. I've met with the residents and business group there. I'm a resident of Camden, the London Borough of Camden, and so I feel very much in tune with the issues that are faced by residents there.
The agency change principle, does that apply to licensing decisions as well?
No, it's planning. It comes under planning.
And I want to put to you the question I put to Philip earlier on. Do you think residents are protected now?
Well, I think
in the stress areas.
Yes, in stress areas. I think residents have a very strong and clear voice.
That's not what I asked you.
Do I? Okay.
The document talks
Maybe
about
you could be
the document talks about protection of residents from the ill effects of the night economy.
Yes.
Do you think residents in those stress areas that I've mentioned, Camden, Soho,
yes,
Covent Garden and so forth,
yes,
Camden Town, do you think they're protected from the ill effects of the night economy now?
Are they protected?
Well, that's what the document talks about.
Being protected.
Yes.
So can you enlighten me on what you're, you know, sort of...
Well, it's not my document, it's your document. And Philip used that quote back.
Well, you know as well as I do, Andrew, that there are laws in place that protect residents from noise, and that residents have the ability to complain to their local councillor about this, and that councils have a statutory duty to respond to that. So that is a measure of protection.
No, in practice, are residents protected from the ill effects of the nighttime economy, of people thrown up and urinating on their doorsteps, from the noise, from all the other trouble that comes along with it?
You know, it's interesting.
Are residents protected from the noise of the night tube, despite assurances from TfL? I can assure you they're not.
Well, it's interesting, Andrew, that you seem to really want to focus very much on the sort of old tropes around the nighttime economy and culture, because my job is very much about changing the conversation around the nighttime economy. This is worth £26 billion to London. It's due to grow to almost £30 billion by 2030. We ignore this at our peril. And my job is about making sure that this is done in a balanced and sustainable way.
So I come back to my question. Do you think residents now are protected from the ill effects of the nighttime economy in those stress areas? It's a simple question.
Yes.
You do? Okay, so when residents complain to me about people throwing up on their doorsteps or urinating on their doorsteps or throwing rubbish into their front yards, that's not happening?
I didn't say that. You asked me if they were protected, and I gave you an answer. And that is surely, you know, part of a job that perhaps we could do together. And I'd love to meet up with you for a cup of tea and talk about how I might be able to help you with the residents in your area that are concerned about those kinds of things. That's,
when residents complain to me in Covent Garden, like they have in Seven Dials, about the police response to drug dealing, do you think they're protected then? When the police say, well, we can't arrest people because we don't have enough, it will just take the police off the streets, what we can do is displace them into Westminster. And then people in Soho complain to me about the intimidation they suffer from drug dealers in Soho at the night time. Are they protected?
It's interesting because all of these things also happen during the day, yeah? And I think that just solely laying this on the doorstep of the nighttime economy is a bit unfair.
But do you think they're protected?
Well, I answered your question, and I do think that there is protection, but there's, of course, more that we can do. Of course there's more that we can do.
Because I don't think they feel protected at all.
Well, I'd very much like to come out with you and do one of my night surgeries in your area. Maybe we can work together on this. You know, my job is very much a collaborative one, so you know, it is my job to be on the streets and to see and hear what's going on.
See, I mean, you talk about finding the balance, but it doesn't seem to me that you're really reflecting the balance between the importance of the nighttime economy and protecting the residents. It seems to me that your thrust is very much in one direction.
This is the Economic Scrutiny Committee, so I am focusing on the economic benefits of the nighttime economy and culture.
But your document, section 4, I think it's section 4, says promote safety and well-being of residents, workers and visitors. Yet the action plan, how will we do this, doesn't mention residents at all.
And what is your question?
Well, why?
I shall look into that and I'll get back to you about that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
You finished. Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. I'd like to go back and look at night surgeries, please. You said in the very beginning that you've done 4 night surgeries.
Yes.
I could only find reference to 2, and that was the Night Tube in November, and then a second one in March 2017. So I know where they were, and they've
Yes.
been advertised. Where were the
Then
other?
there was one in Croydon as well.
And when was that?
That was, gosh, it's all a bit of a, it was I'll have to check the exact date on that for you, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But it was sort of within the last 3 months that I did Croydon.
Right, and the other,
Pardon me?
and the other one?
So I did Croydon, Waltham Forest and Hackney, then the Night Tube and...
No, they were before. So since Croydon then, where have you been? You said you'd done 4. I now know about the first 2 and the third one,
Yes.
Croydon. Where was the 4th one? That must have been
Where
in the
was the
last
4th?
couple of
remember
months. Only a couple of months to remember.
Yeah.
only.
Where was it? Kingston, that's right.
Kingston.
Sorry.
And how did you advertise that, going back to what my colleague... was
Yeah,
saying?
so with Kingston in particular, I worked closely with the council there, and they were very keen to show me the kinds of positive work that they're doing around the nighttime economy and culture. So it was a visit that was put together in conjunction with the Business Improvement District and local councillors who took me to a series of nightclubs, met with local residents, met with the council, and yeah.
Because, I mean, as councillors and politicians, you say you flip it on your head and you go and see who you want to see. But the truth of it is that we want to listen to residents, and if they want to come to see us with a specific problem or issue,
Yes.
we advertise our surgeries so that they can come and talk to us,
Yes.
as opposed to us cherry picking. And it is part of your remit, I read, because I'm new, so you must forgive me. I've read that it's part of your remit to have these, a programme, it says here, of night surgeries.
Yes, that's right.
So where is the programme going? Where is
Yes.
it published?
So we publish it on the website, on the GLA website.
Because I
where there-
couldn't find Croydon or Kingston.
No, they were, to be fair, I think it's good to call them sort of mini surgeries, because they were set up very specifically to do focused visits on particular areas.
So they weren't surgeries at all.
No, they're mini surgeries, I will call
So
them.
we've done 2 surgeries.
Yes.
Then. We've done 2 proper
Yes.
night surgeries
Yes.
since you were
Yes.
put in
We had
position.
another one set up, but unfortunately the general election was called and we weren't able to do that.
So where is your next proper night surgery?
So we're looking at Southwark and Lewisham. So what I try and do is pair up boroughs who have quite a developed nighttime economy and culture with those that are looking to improve their nighttime offering, to do sort of information sharing, and to pair up councils and councillors who, may not otherwise have the opportunity to have that kind of learning.
Do you not think it's important to go to places where there's no nighttime economy at all to try and encourage that?
Absolutely, but only if those particular areas really want that. I think it's clear. I want to be clear that having and developing a nighttime economy isn't something that should be forced on any particular area. There has to be a will within the local authority, within local residents, within the council to want that to happen. I mean, Waltham Forest is a really good example. I know that you've had evidence from Waltham Forest anyway, and they're looking at positively developing their nighttime economy. And so I'm very much about wanting to encourage those places that do want to develop it.
Assembly Hall, I'm going to bring in Assemblymember Arnold now.
Okay, go to my questions.
Yes.
Yes. Well, Amy, before I start my questions, can I just say thank you for putting at the centre of your work the issue about safety of women in the nighttime economy. Nikki Gavran and I started off this work in 2000, and it stalled with the second mayor of London, so I'm glad that you've put it right back there on the agenda. Thank you for that. And my colleague, I know, was at your Women's Summit, and she's going to bring that round. Regrettably, I couldn't attend. But we do have a date. We are going out, because I can't bear it that you should visit my patch again without me. All roads lead to Waltham Forest, it's clear. The question then is about workers in the nighttime economy. And you've just told us about the 26 billion sort of figure in terms of this economy. Is that all of culture, or is that just nighttime?
No, that is the nighttime economy.
That's the nighttime, and separate from the cultural offer.
No, that includes everything in the nighttime economy.
Right.
So when I say nighttime economy and culture,
Yeah.
I use that term just because I think it's important to put culture at the center of our nighttime economy.
Right.
Otherwise, it becomes just a monetary transaction. And actually, if we think about culture in terms of the arts, but also culture in terms of the kind of culture of life at night that we want. Do we want one that is sustainable, that is balanced, that has offerings for everyone in London? Yes, that's the kind of culture of life that we want at night. So, but the economic number, the numbers, that comes from a study that EY has done, our neighbours just over there, and they've done and continue to do some great work looking into the value of the nighttime economy in London and around the world.
Well, those who deliver that value are the workers.
Yes, absolutely.
So I go back to the question I raised with Philip Kolvin, your colleague, and that is how do you intend to address the pressures faced by workers, including, I've mentioned fear of safety and well-being, but key to that is securing a fair and decent wage?
Yes, and I agree with you, and that's why one of the first people I met with when I took up my role as Night Czar was to meet with Frances O'Grady, the General Secretary of the TUC, because I think workers at night are people that have been disregarded, seen as doing, perhaps second-rate jobs, or, jobs that are hidden. And as Londoners, we really depend on people that work at night, be that in the health service, be that as security guards, the police service. These are vital services, and I am very clear that people that work at night should have exactly the same rights and benefits of those that work during the day.
Okay. And your colleague talked about skilling up the workforce. How does that fit into your role, and what conversations have you had, say, with your colleague, Deputy Mayor of Business?
Yeah, so I've worked closely with Rajesh, but also with the Deputy Mayor for education, and we're in agreement that skills and skilling up our workforce, certainly as we face Brexit, is very important. And so this fits in very well with my remit. If we have an economy that's growing in a sustainable and balanced way, we need to have people who work and want to work in the nighttime economy in London to sustain that growth.
Yeah, and where are you? It's the sort of annual question, not at this committee, but at another, about the London living wage, and indeed how the mayor has a role to promote that, and I would imagine that then lives within your portfolio.
Yes.
And just share with me your thoughts on a nighttime premium. We've heard about nurses and health workers.
Yes.
Now, unless they've got rid of it, which wouldn't surprise, those workers working at night would get a nighttime premium.
Yes. I'd like to look into that, and perhaps that's something we could talk about. I think that, you know, there's certainly a body of work to be done around making sure that people that work at night have the choice to work at night. Some people choose to work at night, and you know, there are some amazing stories from people that I've met during my night surgeries. You know, I met with 2 security guards who work at a library and at one of the universities here in London, and I said, do you choose to work these hours? And they work 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. And they said, we do choose to work these hours because we go home, we take our children to school, then we have a sleep, and then we wake up, we pick our kids up from school, we have tea with our kids, and then we come to work.
But just because it's a choice doesn't mean that they should be paid less. So
no, I absolutely agree with you.
Have you done any analysis and can give us any figures in terms about the proportion of nighttime economy workers who do get the London living wage?
No, but I will take that to the TUC. I'll do some investigation into that and report back to you.
Because that would be a starter,
yes,
wouldn't
absolutely.
it, for your... Because, and I mean, people were talking about the future.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be just a disaster if the future took if we took into the future the army of low-paid workers that we have now?
Yes. I agree with you. It has to be done in a sustainable way, in a way that respects people that work at night, and people who work at night have exactly the same right to have access to equal pay and goods and services that people who work during the day do.
That's something I'm sure we'll return to at either this committee or another.
Yes.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. The roadmap you're anticipating is going to be published soon, correct?
Well, the roadmap is actually the action points in the vision document. So we have the vision and the roadmap. So the roadmap being action points, and in the sort of blue squares in your in the vision.
But
So.
our previous gentleman, the chair of the board that's not there at the moment, said that this was just a starter for 10. So do we take this as just a sampler, as he said, of what you might want to do, or is actually this going to be?
No, I think you'll see in the vision document, if you have a look at every point, there is a blue square that highlights an action
I'd read
point.
it, despite it just coming up.
So and the action point is the action that we are either in some cases are taking or will be taking.
So it's not a starter for 10, it's an actual document that we must pay real attention to.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, well, that's interesting. So who will bear the responsibility for making sure that it's implemented?
So I work directly for the Deputy Mayor for Culture. I sit in the Culture team, and the Mayor. So those are the people that I will be reporting to, making sure that I hit all the targets that they have set for me.
So really we can hold you to account for, although they're a bit wishy-washy, but you will be held to account to the sections in blue, albeit a starter for 10 document, quote. Yeah?
So can you be clear with what you're asking?
I'm sorry, I thought you'd follow, because I know you were listening. I'm just concerned because we were told that this is by no means the vision, as it were. It was more a starter for 10, and I'm quoting. You were listening. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering whether the bits in blue are absolutely what you're going to do, which you're saying it is. The gentleman in charge of the commission that doesn't exist was saying it's a start of a 10. So I'm just wondering who we can hold to account to make sure this is all done.
Yes.
Can I just clarify, because I thought that the blue action points are what Amy is saying that she will be held for account to. I think what Philip Colvin was saying was that the Commission will be producing a document in future that
Separate too.
that is a separate document that takes all that outside information and feeds it back in response to this.
There's something that is so important to the Mayor. It's amazing that there isn't a commission and there isn't a proper document for it all to fit together.
I think
This does fit together because this is a vision and a roadmap with action plans.
And
It's
we
very
can hold
clear.
and we can hold you to account.
Yes, that's what I'm
Do-
here for.
Do you sit with the night champions on their...
Yes, I do attend the meetings.
Oh, good, you do. Do you know which boroughs attend?
We can get a full list of all of the boroughs that attended both meetings. But as Philip said earlier, councillors, we have about 20 boroughs represented, as I'm sure many of the Assembly members here who are councillors or previous councillors understand. Some councillors do have jobs during the day and weren't able to attend. But we make sure and share that information.
Okay. And what key areas would you like to see progress made in by the autumn?
Key areas. Well, I think, are you talking about in terms of what? In terms of the nighttime champions, or overall, or?
If you look at your remit, what
Yes.
would you like to see changed or improved, or what would you like to see done
Yes.
as a priority, given that this is your remit?
Well, I think one of the key areas that I've been working on quite a lot already is around venues and making sure that grassroots live music venues, pubs, clubs and LGBT venues, that we stem that flow of closure. I have done quite a bit of casework on, worked directly with over 50 venues since I've been appointed to help them and advise them, act as a mediator. And so that work is in train, and the mayor's committed to doing an annual audit of LGBT venues and also of grassroots live music venues. So my work will be measured, and that success will be measured in terms of that. That's just one area of work.
And that will be published, will it?
Yes, just that we have, you may have seen the report that came out about 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, around LGBT venues, and the mayor's promise of an audit was in there. So.
Okay, I mean, one of your remits is also that there is better coordination and collaboration across London in the development of the nighttime activity. So have you spoken to all the boroughs?
So I've spoken with most of the boroughs. I'm sure I have, I can get you a list of absolutely everyone that I've spoken to.
That would be really helpful.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Bailey, just earlier you'd put your hand up and I didn't call you.
This would be an appropriate time to call me.
Would this indeed? Okay.
Hello, Mr. Lamé. Would you agree that one of your major tasks is to engage with local authorities?
Yes, I think the powers that we have here in the mayor's office are limited, but convening power is the main power that we do have. And I think speaking with local authorities and councillors across London is absolutely vital to my work. It's one aspect of it, yes.
Because as a Londoner, I cannot escape some of the... Has this task been made harder for you because of some of your public announcements about political parties, members of those parties? Has it made it harder for you?
I think this has already been dealt with.
Assembly Member Bailey, I'm sorry, that was dealt with at oversight, and I think it's not part of the discussion of our questioning today.
I, as a member of said party, think it is very relevant. I take your point, Chair, to your meeting, but I think it's relevant.
I'm sorry. I know it's been dealt with at oversight, and I would prefer us not to continue
I just
on
want to
that
put on
line.
record that I disagree. Can I ask you one other question as well? earlier on, you said you speak to boroughs who are trying to develop some kind of nighttime offer. But don't you think, as a czar, you should be trying to sell it to other boroughs that don't? If you truly believe the value of the nighttime economy is so large, and you said 26 billion, and hopefully more in the future, what attempts have you made to speak to boroughs who are not openly engaging with this initiative?
Yes, it's an interesting point, and I think that this is really a matter of balance, because some boroughs have very well-developed nighttime economies and others don't. And the ones that don't have an opportunity to develop it in a very balanced and sustainable way. I mean, just at the last Borough Champions meeting, we were talking with some representatives from Bexley, and they have their first hotel that's come to Bexley, and they were talking about how that might attract visitors to the area, how that might increase, the need or desire for, entertainment venues around there. And so, that's an interesting discussion.
But are you actively promoting said discussions in boroughs that are not doing it? I say it because I used to live in Zone 2, I now live in Zone 6 or whatever it is, it might be 9. The point is, some boroughs may have assets that they're not aware of, that this initiative should be promoting to them. So if you're an outside borough, you might not naturally come to the table, but shouldn't you surely be reaching out and inviting them to the table?
Yes, absolutely. That's a big part of my job. And certainly with the Borough Champions Network, I get the opportunity to meet with everyone en masse, but also do a lot of individual work in visiting boroughs and having quite nuanced, detailed discussions about what is going on in the nighttime economy in that particular area.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to take us back to last night and women's safety. And I think the whole issue of expanding the nighttime economy, making sure that everyone, whether they work there or whether they're participating or whether they're just travelling home through an area where there is nighttime activity, feels safe. And I just wonder if you can outline what you thought the key learning points from last night's session were.
Yes, and thank you very much for attending as well. And we also had Assembly Member Boff, who attended as well. So I'd just like that noted that he did attend and contributed to the workshops. So, so some of the key takeaways from yesterday, the idea is to have to start a conversation around women's safety at night. And there are lots of organizations and different initiatives that exist, but there's a general feeling that there's some gaps in terms of bringing all of these advocates together, and so bringing them under the umbrella of women's safety at night it was the focus, and so one of the takeaways is forming a women's night safety charter. And this is a charter that we're hoping to develop over the next 6 to 12 months in conjunction with all of the stakeholders. We had over 100 stakeholders present last night to develop a sustainable and safe way for women to work and play at night, because it's very clear, women work at night, women have just as much right to go out and play at night and experience the nighttime economy, and we need to make sure that it's safe.
Thank you. And that presumably the Charter can connect back with what Philip Kolvin was talking about in terms of training nighttime economy staff, so that there's a kind of gold standard.
Yes, there's quite a lot that came out of the session yesterday, and a lot of wishes and desires. We have to kind of go back and see, what might actually be able to be achieved with the powers that we have here at City Hall. But I think there's certainly a will for a charter with some teeth that actually could possibly, really change the way the nighttime economy operates around women's safety. There's already some really great work that's being done. But I think that there's real room to kind of amplify that. And there has been some excellent work that's been done here in the past, as Assemblymember Arnold pointed out. I'd like to be able to capitalize on that and move forward with that.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much for your time coming here this morning to answer our questions.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we all look forward to seeing the fruits of what you're working on,
Yes.
and the idea of a nighttime economy that, as you say, is balanced and
Yes.
works for the people who are working in it and the people who are living in the areas
Yes.
around it.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank everyone here today, and also to say that I'd be very interested in visiting any of your local areas, performing night surgery. And so if anyone wants to meet up in the cafeteria for a cup of tea, have a chat about how the work that I'm doing can reach out further to the areas that you're working in, that collaboration is very important to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now have a short break while we wait for the technical hookup to Amsterdam, and we're going to be hearing from the Night Mayor of Amsterdam, who will be talking about how they tackle their nighttime economy and make sure it works for everyone.
There he is. There's Anna.
Oh, that was quick.
What is the problem with you?
Hi, Mirik.
What's the matter with you?
Can you hear us?
I'm busy now.
Can we hear him?
Yeah.
Are we connected? We are.
I can hear you guys, that's for sure.
Ah, fantastic. You can hear us, we can hear you. This is wonderful. In which case, we're ready to start? Fantastic. Can I welcome our next guest on the screen on the other side of the room. This is Mirik Milan, who is the Night Mayor of Amsterdam. And I just want to remind members that there may be a slight time delay, so with the questions we just may need to be aware of that. So moving through my notes, can I start by asking you, what do you think is, so why do you think it's important for Amsterdam to have a dedicated person to champion the nighttime economy?
Okay, so the Night Mayor in Amsterdam is an independent non-profit foundation which helps ensure that the city of Amsterdam has a dynamic nightlife. We always say that we really want to bridge the gap between municipalities, so that the mayor and pastors, small business owners like nightclubs and festivals, but also city residents. We always say is by having a dialogue you can change the rules of the game. So why is it so important to have this dialogue? Because cities benefit from having a vibrant nightlife from social, cultural and economic perspective. But the night is always being treated differently than the day. When there's a problem during the day, we will get all the stakeholders together and try to come up with a solution that works, or at least makes the situation a little bit better. When we have a problem at night, really often the first reaction of city officials or the police is to say we have to stop this now, and really often killing an industry.
Sorry, could you hold on just one moment? Could you speak a little bit slower, because the sound isn't perfect, so it's quite hard to understand you. So if you can just slow down a little.
Shall I try for a second to put on my headphones and see if the sound is better?
That would be helpful, thank you.
Is the sound better when I speak to you?
Yes.
Does it sound better like this? Or?
That does sound better, thank you very much indeed.
Okay. No problem at all.
So if you would like to continue.
Yeah, so okay, what you see happening in a lot of cities around the world is that decisions are being made not based on facts, but really based on emotions. This is something you can see happening, for example, in Sydney, in Australia, where they have, because of alcohol-related violence, they have installed lockout laws, and they changed the curfew of venues. And this had a huge impact on the nighttime economy because more than 40 nightclubs has closed, and this whole district and the foot traffic in this district really went down. So having somebody who is like a champion of nightlife, but really brings all the sides together and makes sure and builds also this bridge of trust between the municipality and small business owners is really important for making sure that business can operate, but that also residents and patrons feel safe when they go out at night or at night at the streets.
So you're saying that this this dedicated person is a bridge of trust, which sounds like a wonderful thing, between businesses and residents and the people who are participating and having a night out.
Yes, yes. I truly believe that we need to, because when it comes to the nighttime economy or late night culture, it's really it's really because there's a lot of misconception. Nightlife is really often seen as just only a bad thing, or it's seen as a bad thing. So we really have to, like, step by step work together and build this bridge of trust, and also try to make sure that we find the common ground on which we make sure that the nighttime economy proves its value to everybody. And this is also really about making sure that residents feel safe at night, late at night on the street. But we also, we always say, like, nightlife has an upside and a downside, or life at night, as you can also say it, has an upside and a downside. And the upside is like what I explained before. So the quality it brings from social, cultural, and economic perspective. But the downside is, of course, nuisance of any sort. So, of course, violence and alcohol-related violence. Of course, drug use, but also littering and all other stuff that happens at night. So it's really important to really look at both sides and bring everybody to the table so we can come up with solutions that actually work and that we're not only policing our mistakes.
And so you talk about coming up with solutions that actually work. Can you outline any of the solutions that you have in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so there's two things which are important at the moment in Amsterdam. One of the things is that, in a way, you could say that Amsterdam is being overrun by tourists. So we attract 17 million tourists on a yearly basis, and the city of Amsterdam is only 850,000 people. So we really have to think out how can we spread out these tourists over the city, definitely when they attend our nightlife. So one thing we came up with is having introduced 24-hour licenses for 10 bars and clubs. These are not located in the city center, but more on the outskirts of the cities. These venues attract a lot of people, so the people spread out more over the city, definitely during the night. These venues also make sure that we look at. It's not only about partying 24/7, but it's also about efficient use of buildings. So these venues are all multidisciplinary. And what was really radical about this process is that we, for the first time, by giving out licenses, we looked at the quality of the content the venues were producing. So there were only 10 licenses, and that meant that everybody had to pitch their ID to a committee where I was part of, but also where we laid down the vision for, and that had to pitch to this commission what they were going to do in this venue. And we looked at the quality of the content of the venue, and I think that was a huge step for Amsterdam. For the first time, we were giving out licenses not based on do you have 4 walls, a roof, and a bouncer in front of the door, but do you really, what are you going to do there? And I think a good example is one of these venues has, during the day, they have a supervised kindergarten, So the parents can have lunch or can have lunch at the restaurant. And so it's really about using the building in a different way and thinking about zoning. That is one of the solutions. So we spread out the tours more over the city by these venues, but we're looking at the quality of the content. We always say invest in quality instead of in furniture. To be honest, nobody will learn anything from going to a VIP bar or a VIP room. Yeah, maybe how expensive the champagne is, but not really. Nothing. It has nothing to do with culture. And people don't really like that I say this, but I think really that culture, by raising the cultural offer, you will get more people that are more engaged. And when you have more engaged people, they will also more likely to behave better. So to finish this off, the 24-hour licensed venues make sure that people can decide for themselves when they want to leave. And what you see happening everywhere in the world is that when venues close, they all close at the same time. So all the patrons, they all leave at the same time, and this causes a lot of noise for neighbors. And it's also not controllable anymore, because when there's like 1,000 people suddenly at 4 or 5 a.m. on the street, then it's not controllable. If they leave in smaller groups, then it's really easy to say for the door host, for the bouncer, to say if you want to stay, you can stay inside. If you want to leave, you're going to leave the premises or you're going to leave the venue. So that was one thing. And the other thing is that we had a pilot project in a nightlife district. And in this nightlife district, we worked together with all the stakeholders. And we looked at the public space. How's the public space set up? Are there a lot of obstacles? So we took away most of the obstacles. We looked at, does the area feel safe and welcoming for patrons, but also for residents? We installed square hosts, so stewards that patrol the street every Friday and Saturday night. And the third thing we did, we installed a mobile device, a web app, in which residents can report their complaint, and this complaint goes directly to the first community officer, which is in the neighborhood. This whole project made sure that we now have a 25% decline in violence in nightlife in this district, and almost a 30% decline in reports of nuisance through this app in any sort. So I think these are two of our best practices, you could say it like that.
That sounds very interesting, particularly in relation to some of the concerns that have been raised this morning about residents and how a very active nighttime economy can affect residents. So these square hosts that you talk about, are they it was a bit difficult to hear the soundtrack. Do the residents contact the square hosts, or do they contact the police, did you say?
No, so the mobile website, this web app, it goes to community officers. In the Netherlands, we have community officers. They don't wear a gun, but they can write out tickets. So that's one level in between the police and the square host. The square hosts are 50% is public-private funding, 50% is funded by the entrepreneurs in this district, like a business investment zone. 50% comes from the entrepreneurs in nightlife, and 50% comes from the mayor directly. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Actually, you've answered some of this, but if I just ask the question as is, what are the main challenges to developing a city's nighttime economy? How do you balance the conflicting interests between the residents, the venue owners, and those who use them, and the nighttime economy workers?
Yeah. I think it's really important that the city has a vision on how they want to set up their nighttime economy. I think now for the first time, cities are really taking the nighttime economy serious. It was always, for a really long time, it was just something which was on the side and something they had to deal with, but there was not a lot of interest for it. The main challenge is really to bridge this gap and to understand what all the needs are from all the sides. And I think residents, if you can prove to residents that the city is taking their problems serious, because this is also something which is also really often happening, people are also frustrated by the fact that they have the feeling that the city is not listening to their problems. So we need to get the residents on the table to make sure that they are engaged. We need to make sure that also business owners understand that they're not only responsible for what happens inside, but also what happens on their doorstep and in this district. And I think the third step is that we need to come up with good legislation that will help, that will clamp down on the downside, but will elevate the upside of nightlife. So our biggest challenge has been for the last years is always to explaining to residents that nightlife or life at night is not something to be afraid of. That nightlife is also that there's a lot of forward-thinking and progressive and open-minded people that run these nightclubs and venues and bars and restaurants. And if we work together, then we can come up with solutions that actually work. But everybody has to be engaged in these problems because they are much bigger than only for one entrepreneur or one bar or one restaurant to deal with. Everybody needs to come together and try to come up with solutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We like the solutions and collective solutions. Assembly Member Arnold.
Yes, good afternoon, Mirik. And congratulations, you were the first of many nighttime mayors. And it was just clarity. Were you elected by the people of Amsterdam or just the business community?
No, so I was elected by, you could say more or less 75% of the votes come from the business community and 25% of the votes come from just the residents of Amsterdam, because we mostly speak about topics that concern businesses. But what is really important is that influencing the behavior of patrons, of people that go out. You really need to have also the promoters and the venue owners, and everybody need to have on board, because we will not influence behavior top down. We will also only influence behavior from the grassroots up.
Thank you. And our chair was taken by something you said, and it's a phrase that you've said in many interviews about your role is to create this bridge of trust between all the parties involved. How successful have you been since 2012? Where's your bridge? Is it fully built? Halfway built?
I think we have had a significant amount of impact in the city. We're not there yet, because these ideas and this approach is relatively new. And I think it will take a much longer period of time. But you need to, what really helps is that you prove to people that what you're doing actually works. And I think it really helps that we can now say, after 2 years in this pilot on Rembrandtplein, which is like heavy dense nightlife district in Amsterdam, if you can really say, okay. If you can really say we have a 30% decline of reports of nuisance, and actually residents said this mobile website, it changed my life, I think that is a really, really strong message to send out.
Okay, and then can I just ask you, you've talked about nuisance, and I read somewhere that you're also concerned about greater public protection. So going forward, what are your ambitions for Amsterdam's nighttime economy, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, so we will have elections in Amsterdam next year, So we made a list of things we want to do. For us, it's really important because we see the pressure on the city of Amsterdam that we need to keep on, that we need to make sure that Amsterdam will stay an inclusive city. Prices of housing and real estate is going up really, really rapidly. And actually, maybe we're following in London's footsteps. That's one thing. We need to make sure that life at night is inclusive to everybody. At the moment, we have a really big problem with discrimination of the LGBTQ scene. There's also a lot of violence towards these minority groups, and we really need to think about how we're going to counter this. I see there is a gap between politicians and policymakers and youth culture and underground youth culture. I think in a lot of ways there's a big gap there, and we really want to bring these two sides together. So we need to make sure that people see the value of underground culture and subcultures in the city. We need to protect our the free creative space we have in the city. We don't want this city to be a place where only people with or businesses that have a lot of money can take care that only businesses that have a lot of money can use the city center. So the city center should be also for Amsterdamers, but tours for everybody. This is a big thing. We're hoping to establish that on the lineups of festivals in 2020, we have 35% of female artists. At this moment, it's barely 10 or maybe 50%. I really want to make sure that we have a gender balance better in nightlife. We also want to look at 24-hour zones. So zoning, not just one venue, but really a zone for 24-hour. What every business in this zone can have a 24-hour license. And the last part is really investing in quality instead of in furniture. We need to program the city. And we need to make sure that tourists, when they come to Amsterdam, that we also that they are a little bit more engaged, so they don't use just Amsterdam as their step party or decoration for their event or for their party, but really are more engaged with the city, so they will behave better and there will be less pressure for residents when they come to town.
Well, thank you for that, because there are lots of similarities with the issues, the challenges and the ambitions that certainly the Mayor of London has for our city. Do you have any suggestions for Amy Lamé, our Night Czar, who has a similar role to yours, on any pitfalls, or what particular message would you send her?
Okay, so something what I think is really strong about the strategy which is chosen by Sadiq Khan and by Amy Lamé is really focusing on mobility at night. I think this is a really strong thing. If you look at examples around the world, for example, in Melbourne in Australia, you have 24-hour public transport and it's free. I think creating mobility is really important to keeping an inclusive city, so I really much support this approach, and I hope that it will grow quicker, or that it will grow and there's a room for that. Another thing what we have been focusing on in Amsterdam is sound levels for music festivals and electronic music and music festivals. This is something we have been working on for the last year, because music festivals are really important for the city. They bring in culture, they bring in money, of course, and they bring in a lot of work. And but we in Amsterdam we now find an approach in how that we can make sure that the noise and noise complaints go down for residents, but we can keep quality festivals inside the city.
Okay, so could we have a look at your model? Would you share that with us? Because of course we've heard and we know, because we represent those areas where noise nuisance from both the nighttime economy, from the skies, from just life, is driving some Londoners crazy. Because with the 24-hour tube, then that brings its own noise nuisance, even though it opens up the city, as you say. So we look forward to seeing your model.
Okay. Thank you. We will.
Very good. Assemblymember Dismore, did you want to come in on some of the issues around residents?
I think it's been covered.
You think it's been covered. And Assemblymember Copley, did you want to raise anything extra? Can I thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been really helpful to have your suggestions. I think, you know, those two areas that you outlined at the beginning with the clubs on the outskirts, the different ways that those were working, and the square hosts and the ways for residents to respond about noise complaints. That was incredibly useful, so thank you very much.
Be good to get a copy of the model.
And yes, and we look forward, yes, to a copy of the model, as Assemblymember Arnold just pointed out. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Very, very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we finally have a little bit of business that we need to conclude. There is the committee's work programme. Can we please note the work programme and priorities for 2017 and 2018?
Yep.
Thank you. Can we please note the next meeting will be taking place on the 13th of September at 2 o'clock.
Noted.
Thank you. And I believe there's no other business. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting.
GLA